Welcome back to episode 61 of the 15,000 acre challenge on the massive Huron County 16 X-Map. In today's episode, we're diving right back into our year 3 harvest season as we continue harvesting our brand new 400 acre oat field and begin bringing in even more grain from our largest farming operation yet. Over the past several episodes, we've been extremely busy wrapping up our spring field work and preparing for what is shaping up to be our biggest harvest season so far. Earlier this year, we planted over 4,400 acres of crops across the farm, including more than 3,000 acres of corn and roughly 1,400 acres of wheat spread across several of our massive fields. After weeks of planting, rolling, and fertilizing those crops, we finally wrapped up all of our spring work and began shifting our focus towards harvest season. Last episode officially kicked off our year 3 harvest, and before we could even fire up the combines, we made another major investment into the farm. We purchased a brand new 400 acre field that came with a fully grown crop of oats already planted and ready to harvest. Not only did this give us an early start on harvest season, but it also increased our total land ownership to an incredible 4,800 acres as we continue working towards our ultimate goal of farming 15,000 acres here in Huron County. After purchasing the field, we spent most of the episode preparing our harvesting fleet. All 5 of our John Deere S780 combines were serviced and repaired before being moved out to the field alongside our fleet of Demco 2,200 bushel auger wagons, Case IH tractors, and Kenworth semi-trucks. We then spent quite a bit of time building new course play and auto drive routes to make sure everything was ready for the harvest ahead. By the end of the episode, all of that setup work finally paid off. Our combines had begun opening up the headlands. Our auger wagons were moving grain, and our semi-trucks were already hauling oats back to the mega farm. Most importantly, though, all of the preparation is now behind us, and today we can focus almost entirely on harvesting. To kick things off today, we'll be hopping right back into our Case IH 645 that's sitting behind me. I'll get the last of the oats unloaded from our Demco 2,200 bushel auger wagon, and then we'll head back out to field 213 to check in on the rest of our harvesting fleet. All 5 of our John Deere S780 combines are already back up and running today, and they're currently working their way around the headlands of this massive 400 acre oat field. Now that we spent the time building all of our routes and getting our workers configured in the previous episode, everything should be ready to run much more smoothly today, and hopefully we'll be able to focus entirely on harvesting. One thing I'm really interested in seeing is how our workers perform in this field compared to some of the massive square fields we've created throughout the series. This field has a lot more angles, irregular edges, and awkward sections than what we're used to harvesting. Because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if we run into a few issues with course play or auto drive throughout the day. If we do start running into problems, it may actually influence some future plans I have for this field. Once these oats are harvested, I'd really like to come back in and do some land work. There are several areas where we could remove trees, fill in some ditches, and straighten out some of the field edges, which would make this field much easier to work in moving forward and potentially add even more acres to it. As we continue harvesting today, I'm also going to be paying close attention to how our grain handling system performs. For this oat harvest, I've actually decided to make a fairly significant change to our operation. Normally, we run our large walkabout mother bins, which act as a buffer between our auger wagons and semi-trucks. The idea behind the mother bins is great, and they allow us to store a huge amount of grain right on the edge of the field, but I've started noticing that they occasionally create bottlenecks. If a truck arrives at the mother bin when it's empty, it tends to pull too far forward. And once the mother bin is refilled, it can create some traffic issues and prevent the trucks from filling completely. Because of that, I've decided to leave the mother bins parked for this harvest and instead rely on multiple semi-trucks hauling directly from the field. I'm really curious to see how this setup performs over the course of today's harvest. My gut feeling is that with the number of trucks we have available, this may actually be the more efficient system for our larger fields, but I'd definitely love to hear what you guys think. Do you prefer running the mother bins, or do you think direct unloading into the trucks is the better option for an operation this size? Looking ahead, this 400 acre oat field is really just the beginning of what should be an incredibly busy harvest season. Once we finish harvesting these oats, we'll advance time into the next month and begin preparing for our massive 1,400 acre wheat harvest. After that, we'll have over 3,000 acres of corn waiting for us as well. I've also got some equipment upgrades planned for the harvest season ahead. The local dealership recently brought in some absolutely massive auger wagons, and while they certainly aren't cheap, I think they may be exactly what we need to keep up with the scale of farming we're doing here on Huron County. So while today's focus is finishing this oat harvest, don't be surprised if we start making some major upgrades very soon. Our goal for today is simple. Get this entire 400-acre oat field harvested and haul every bushel back to the mega farm. If everything goes according to plan, we should bring in a very nice payday from this field and put ourselves in a great position heading into the rest of our year 3 harvest season. Let's fire up the equipment and get to work. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Well, we've now managed to get all of the headlands completely harvested in this massive 400-acre oat field, and at this point the operation is finally starting to settle into a rhythm. All 5 of our John Deere S780 combines have now transitioned from harvesting the outer edges of the field and are working their way through the long up and down passes in the middle. As expected, we did run into a few hiccups while making that transition. With all 5 combines finishing the headlands at roughly the same time, several of our auger wagons were also reaching capacity and looking for somewhere to unload. That led to a bit of congestion near the area where our semi-trucks were parked, and for a few minutes we had equipment trying to go in every direction at once. Thankfully, after a bit of maneuvering and a few adjustments to our workers, I was able to get everything sorted back out. All of our auger wagons are now back on their proper routes. The semi-trucks are moving grain back to the farm once again, and our combines are lined up and harvesting exactly the way they're supposed to. Honestly, this is one of the biggest challenges when running an operation of this size. When you've got 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, and multiple semi-trucks all working in the same field, it doesn't take much for a small traffic issue to turn into a much bigger problem. Fortunately, that's exactly why I like to spend time building and fine-tuning these courseplay and auto-drive systems, because once everything gets sorted out, they can handle a huge amount of work for us. Now that the headlands are behind us, I'm hoping things will begin running much more smoothly. The middle of the field is much more straightforward for our workers to navigate, and these long passes should allow the combines to operate much more efficiently without constantly turning around or crossing paths with one another. From here on out, it should just be a matter of keeping the combines unloaded, keeping the trucks moving, and steadily working our way through the rest of this massive oat field. We've already harvested a significant amount of grain, but there's still a lot of acres left standing out here, and I'm looking forward to seeing just how much oats we can haul back to the mega farm before the day is over. At this point, our entire harvesting operation is really starting to hit its stride. Now that we've worked through the early setup stages and ironed out some of the traffic issues between our combines, auger wagons, and semi-trucks, everything seems to be running much more smoothly, and because of that, we're harvesting and hauling an incredible amount of oats back to the mega farm. What's really impressive is that we're not even halfway through this 400-acre field yet, and we've already managed to haul well over 500,000 liters of oats back to our massive silo complex. On top of that, I'm sure we've got another few 100,000 liters spread throughout our 5 Demco, 2,200 bushel auger wagons that are continuously cycling around the field unloading combines. It's honestly going to be really interesting to see where our final total ends up once this field is completely harvested. Going into this harvest, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect from these oats, since this crop actually came with the field when we purchased it last episode. The previous owner had done a decent job taking care of the field, and the crop was in fairly good condition, but it definitely wasn't managed to the same standards that we typically use on our own fields. The soil wasn't fully optimized, and the crop wasn't at maximum potential either. So I expected the yields to be decent, but not necessarily spectacular. Even with that in mind though, these oats are producing far better than I originally anticipated, and every time the auger wagons unload into the trucks, the numbers just keep climbing. This certainly won't be our biggest harvest of year 3. Once we move into our 1,400 acres of wheat and eventually tackle over 3,000 acres of corn later this year, those harvests are going to completely dwarf what we're doing today. But that's exactly why I think this oat field is so important. Not only is it giving us an early start on harvest season, but it's also allowing us to test all of our harvesting systems and workers before we move into those much larger crops. Every acre we harvest here helps us fine-tune our courseplay and auto-drive setup so that when it's time to tackle the wheat and corn harvest, we'll be ready. On top of that, all of these oats are helping us start rebuilding our grain inventory. Every truckload that arrives back at the mega farm is filling up our silos and creating another source of income that we'll eventually be able to cash in on this winter. If the yields continue the way they have so far, this field should generate a very nice return and help offset a good portion of the money we spent purchasing it last episode. For now though, let's keep the combines moving and see just how much grain we can pull off this field before the day is over. We're definitely starting to see the finish line now. At this point, we've managed to harvest well over half of this massive 400-acre oat field, and overall I'd say the operation has been running pretty well. We've had a few minor hiccups here and there with some of our hired workers getting stuck or occasionally losing their routes. But that's almost expected when you're running an operation of this size with 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, and multiple semi-trucks all working in the same field. Thankfully, after making a few adjustments to some of our course play and auto drive settings, things seem to be running much more smoothly now. This field is definitely one of the more challenging fields we've worked in throughout the series. Unlike the large square fields we've created ourselves, this field has a lot of angled edges, irregular boundaries, and a few awkward areas that can make life difficult for our workers. Honestly, I think once this harvest is finished, we'll probably come back during the fall or winter months and do some land improvement work around the field. There are several tree lines we could remove and a few ditches we could fill in, which would not only allow us to expand the field even further, but should also make it much easier for our hired workers to operate here in the future. I think with a little bit of work, we could turn this already impressive 400-acre field into an even larger and more efficient field for future harvests. Now that we've spent quite a bit more time harvesting since the last time we checked in, let's take a look at how things are looking back at the mega farm. The numbers have climbed incredibly fast, and we've actually managed to double our oat inventory since our last update. We now have well over 1 million liters of oats sitting inside of our massive silo complex, and that's a pretty impressive number considering this is only the first harvest of year 3. It's always nice seeing the silos start filling up this early in the season, because every liter of grain we bring in now is going to contribute to another big payday later this winter when it's time to start marketing our crops. And the best part is we're not finished yet. We've still got a decent amount of this field left standing, and we also have a lot of grain currently sitting inside of our combines, auger wagons, and semi-trucks that hasn't even made it back to the farm yet. If the yields continue the way they have throughout the rest of this harvest, I think there's a very good chance we could push our total inventory up to around 1.5 million liters of oats by the time this field is completely harvested and every last bushel has been hauled back to the mega farm. That would be an incredible way to kick off our year 3 harvest season, and it would give us a great start as we begin preparing for the much larger wheat and corn harvests that are still waiting for us later this year. For now, though, let's keep these combines moving and see just how much more grain we can pull off this final section of the field. This field ended up being a fantastic addition to the farm, and honestly, I'm really happy with the purchase. Not only did it increase our total land ownership to 4,800 acres, but it also gave us a great opportunity to kick off our year 3 harvest season while we wait for the rest of our crops to finish maturing. Over the course of today's episode, we managed to get all 5 of our John Deere S780 combines working their way through the field. Our fleet of Demco auger wagons stayed busy unloading grain, and our semi-trucks hauled load after load of oats back to the mega farm. We had a few small issues with workers getting stuck here and there, but overall I'd say our harvesting operation performed very well, especially considering this is one of the more irregular shaped fields we've worked in throughout the series. As we wrap things up, we've now got well over 1.3 million liters of oats sitting inside of our silo complex back at the mega farm, and that's already an incredible number for the very first harvest of year 3. But the exciting part is that we're not quite done counting yet. We've still got oats sitting inside of our combines, auger wagons, and semi-trucks that haven't made it back to the farm yet. Once all of that grain gets hauled back and unloaded into the silos, I'm pretty confident we're going to clear our goal of 1.5 million liters of oats from this one single 400-acre field. That's a fantastic yield and should help offset a good portion of the money we spent purchasing this field last episode. Now that our oat harvest is officially complete, it's time to start looking ahead to what's next, and things are about to get much bigger. Next episode, we'll be advancing into our first wheat harvest of year 3, and we'll be firing up our entire harvesting fleet once again as we begin tackling roughly 1,400 acres of wheat spread across some absolutely massive fields. We'll also be bringing in some equipment upgrades for the harvest season ahead. I've been looking at a few larger pieces of equipment that should help us keep up with the scale of farming we're doing here on Huron County, and I think they're going to make a huge difference once we get into our wheat and corn harvest later this year. As always, thank you all so much for watching and supporting the 15,000 Acre Challenge. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode as we officially begin our year 3 wheat harvest and continue working our way toward the ultimate goal of farming 15,000 acres here on Huron County. Welcome back to episode 62 of the 15,000 Acre Challenge on the massive Huron County 16 X-Map. In today's episode, we're officially diving into the heart of our year 3 harvest season as we begin bringing in thousands of acres of crops and roll out some of the biggest harvesting upgrades we've ever made on this farm. Over the past few episodes, we've been preparing for what is shaping up to be our largest and most demanding harvest season yet. Earlier this year, we sold off millions of liters of grain that were still sitting in our silo complex from previous harvests, and that massive payday brought in over $11 million for the farm. Rather than letting that money sit in the bank, we immediately put it back to work by expanding our operation even further. One of the biggest investments we made was the purchase of a brand new 400-plus acre field that came with a fully grown crop of oats already planted and ready to harvest. That field gave us the perfect opportunity to get an early jump on harvest season while we waited for our wheat and corn crops to finish maturing. After purchasing the field, we spent a lot of time preparing our harvest fleet. All 5 of our John Deere S780 combines were serviced and repaired. Our fleet of Case Steiger and Quad-Track tractors were brought out of storage, and we spent hours creating new auto-drive routes and course-play courses to handle this brand new field efficiently. The hardware paid off as we managed to completely harvest that entire 400-acre oat field in the last episode. Since then, I've hauled the remaining grain back to the farm, unloaded all of our equipment, and gotten everything ready for the next stage of harvest season. To kick things off today, we'll be hopping into our Chevy Silverado pickup truck and heading over to the mega farm so we can take a look at exactly how many oats we managed to harvest from that new field. After getting everything hauled back and unloaded into the silo complex, it turns out that our newest field produced just over 1.6 million liters of oats. That's a fantastic start to year 3 harvest, and while oats won't be our biggest crop this season, they should still generate a very healthy profit once we sell them during the winter months. With the oat harvest officially behind us, it's now time to turn our attention toward the remaining 4,400 acres still waiting to be harvested. Those acres are split between roughly 1,400 acres of wheat and over 3,000 acres of corn. And now that we've advanced into late July, our wheat crop has finally reached full maturity and is ready to come off the field. Normally, we'd simply move our combines into the wheat fields with draper headers and begin harvesting. But this year, I've decided to do things a little differently. Instead of direct harvesting, we're going to swath all 1,400 acres of wheat first. By laying the crop into windrows and then picking it up with specialized headers, we should be able to gain roughly a 25% yield increase across all of our wheat acres. Considering how much land we're farming now, that extra yield could translate into millions of additional liters of grain and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional profit. Of course, making that happen means we're going to need some new equipment. Our farm currently doesn't own a single swather, so the first major project of the day will be a trip to the dealership where we'll be purchasing 5 brand new MacDon M1240 self-propelled swathers. Once the swathers are purchased, I'll begin sending them across the map to our second farmyard. Sitting directly beside that farm is currently the largest field we own, a massive 800-acre wheat field that will become the focus of today's operation. As the swathers arrive, I'll begin setting up a brand new course-play course and then position all 5 machines side by side so they can begin working together across the field. Watching 5 swathers operating simultaneously on an 800-acre field should be quite a sight, and I'm really curious to see how quickly they can chew through those acres. While the swathers begin opening up the field, I'll jump back over to our harvest fleet and begin preparing the combines for their next job. The first thing we'll need to do is remove all 5 draper headers and place them onto header trailers. After that, I'll send our fleet of John Deere S780 combines down to the dealership, where we'll purchase 5 brand new pickup headers specifically designed for harvesting swathe crops. Once those headers are installed, the combines will begin making their way toward the wheat field where they'll wait for the swathers to get a sufficient head start. But the combine upgrades won't be the only changes we're making today. I've also decided that it's finally time to upgrade our grain cart fleet. Our Demco 2200 auger wagons have served us extremely well over the past few years, but harvest season continues to get larger every single year, and I'm beginning to feel like we're outgrowing them. So while the combines are at the dealership, I'll also be sending all of our Case Steiger and Quadtrac tractors over as well. Once they arrive, we'll be selling off all 5 Demco 2200 auger wagons and replacing them with 5 brand new Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel grain carts. These things are absolutely massive. Each cart holds well over 100,000 liters of grain, making them some of the largest auger wagons available. With how much grain we're expecting to pull off these wheat and corn fields this year, I think these larger carts are going to make a huge difference and help keep our combines moving much more efficiently throughout harvest season. Once all of the new equipment has arrived at the wheat field, I'll head back over there myself to check on progress. Ideally, I'd like to see the swathers completely finish the headlands and make a solid start on the up and down passes before we ever think about firing up the combines. The last thing I want is for 5 combines to catch 5 swathers halfway through the field and bring the entire operation to a stop. If everything goes according to plan, the swathers should have a nice lead built up by the time we arrive. At that point, we'll begin lining up all 5 John Deere S780 combines, position our fleet of tractors and grain carts around the field, and get ready to launch what will easily be the biggest wheat harvest we've ever attempted in this series. This 800-acre field is just the beginning of a much larger harvest season, and if all goes well today, we'll be bringing in millions of liters of wheat before we're finished. We've got a huge day ahead of us, some massive equipment upgrades to make, and hundreds upon hundreds of acres waiting to be harvested. So let's fire up the engines and get to work. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I've now managed to get all 5 of our brand new MacDon M 1240 swathers over to this massive 800-acre wheat field. And after spending a bit of time setting everything up, I've created a coarse play course that should allow all 5 machines to work together and efficiently swath this entire field. I'll now begin sending the swathers off one by one and getting them lined up across the field. Once they're all moving and working their way around the first headland, I'll hop into the 5th swather and follow the fleet for a little while just to make sure everything is running smoothly. With 5 machines working side by side across an 800-acre field, it won't take much for one of them to get slightly off course and create problems for the rest of the fleet. So I'd rather stay close by and catch any issues early before they turn into bigger headaches later on. This is actually going to be the first time we've ever attempted swathing on this scale here on the 15,000-acre challenge. So I'm really interested to see how everything performs. The goal is to lay all of this wheat down in a nice clean windrows that our combines will later be able to pick up with their new pickup headers. If everything works the way it's supposed to, we should receive a pretty substantial yield bonus from this wheat harvest, which could end up adding millions of extra liters of grain to our final totals by the time harvest season is over. If everything looks good and the swathers are laying down clean windrows, we'll leave them to continue working, and then it's going to be time to start preparing the rest of our harvest fleet. At that point, I'll jump back over to our 400-acre oat field, where all of our combines, tractors, and grain carts are still parked from the harvest we wrapped up in the last episode. The swathers may be the first part of this operation, but the combines and grain carts are where today's biggest upgrades are about to happen. The first thing I'll do is begin getting all 5 of our John Deere S780 combines moving toward the local dealership. Once they arrive, we'll remove the draper headers and swap them over to brand new pickup headers that are specifically designed for harvesting swathed crops. This will be the first time these combines have ever harvested wheat in this configuration, so I'm excited to see how they perform once we finally get them into the field. At the same time, I'll also begin sending our fleet of Case Steiger and Quad-Track tractors down to the dealership as well. Those tractors are currently pulling our Demco 2200 auger wagons, but by the end of today, those grain carts will be retired and replaced with something much bigger. We'll be upgrading to the massive Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons, which are by far the largest grain carts we've ever owned in this series. With over 100,000 liters of capacity in each cart, these things should be a huge help as we begin harvesting some of the largest fields we've ever tackled. While all of that equipment is making its way to the dealership, I'll also start sending our fleet of semi-trucks directly over to the second farm. That way they'll already be staged and ready to go by the time the combines and auger wagons arrive. With how much wheat we're expecting to pull off this 800-acre field, I have a feeling those trucks are going to be very busy before the day is over. For now, though, the focus is on getting these 5 swathers up and running and making sure they get a good head start on the field. If all goes according to plan, by the time our combines arrive, we'll have hundreds of acres of wheat already laying in windrows and waiting to be harvested. Well, after making my way back over to the second farmyard, it looks like things are starting to get pretty busy around here. Our fleet of semi-trucks has now arrived, and all 5 of our John Deere S780 combines are beginning to roll in with their brand new pickup headers attached. On top of that, our Case IH and Quad-Track tractors pulling the new Elmer's Home Master auger wagons should be arriving any minute now as well. With this much equipment converging on the same area at the same time, it won't take long for things to get a little chaotic if we're not careful. Before we end up with a major traffic jam on the roads surrounding the field, I'm going to start getting some of this equipment moved into position and ready for harvest. The first priority will be getting all 5 combines into the field. I'll begin moving them in one at a time and getting each machine configured on the exact same course-play course that our MacDon swathers are currently running. By using the same course, the combines should be able to follow directly behind the swathers and perfectly track all of the wheat windrows that are being laid down across the field. This is actually going to be the first real test of our new swathing operation, and I'm really curious to see how smoothly everything works. In theory, the swathers should stay comfortably ahead of the combines, while the combines simply follow behind and pick up all of the wheat that's already laying in the windrows. If everything works the way I'm hoping, this could become our standard method for harvesting wheat moving forward. Once I get all 5 combines moved into position and lined up along the edge of the field, our tractors should begin arriving with the new Elmer's Home Master grain carts. Those things are absolutely massive compared to the Demco carts we were running previously, and I'd like to get them pulled safely off the road before the rest of our equipment arrives. After all of the harvest equipment is staged and ready to go, I'll jump back into one of the MacDon swathers and spend a little bit of time running some passes myself. I want to make absolutely sure everything is operating correctly and that the swathers are leaving behind clean, consistent windrows before we unleash the combines into the field. If everything looks good, we'll then begin firing up the combines and sending them off one by one. I'll start with the lead machine and gradually work my way across the lineup until all 5 S780s are harvesting wheat. Initially, they'll focus on cleaning up the headlands and picking up the windrows that have already been laid down around the outside of the field. Once the combines create a little bit of room to work with, I'll start moving our semi-trucks into the field as well. Since this is the first time we've harvested this field with this setup, I'll need to create a brand new auto drive route that allows the trucks to safely enter the field, position themselves for loading, and then make their way back to the silos at the second farmyard to unload all of the wheat. As soon as the combines start filling up, I'll hop into one of our Case IH tractors and begin running grain cart duties. This will give us a chance to put the new Elmer's Home Master auger wagons through their first real test and see just how much grain these massive carts can handle. With over 100,000 liters of capacity in each wagon, I have a feeling they're going to make a huge difference once all 5 combines are operating at full capacity. After that, I'll circle back and begin creating a second set of auto drive routes specifically for the auger wagons. The goal is to have the grain carts automatically unload into the semi-trucks whenever they're full and then immediately return to the combines, so we can keep grain moving as efficiently as possible. One major change I've decided to make for this harvest is removing the mother bin from the operation. In previous harvests, we've relied heavily on the mother bin to act as a buffer between the auger wagons and the trucks. But with the size of these new Elmer's grain carts, I'm starting to think it may actually be more efficient to eliminate that extra step entirely. For today's harvest, we're going to run an experiment and see how things perform without it. My hope is that the larger grain carts can act as their own buffer and keep the trucks loaded without needing the additional mother bin in the middle. If it works, it should simplify the entire operation and reduce some of the bottlenecks we've experienced in previous harvests. Well, our fleet of MacDon swathers seems to be doing an excellent job so far, and they've now managed to build up a pretty significant lead on the field. At this point, they've laid down a massive amount of wheat into windrows, and I think they've got more than enough of a head start that we can finally begin bringing our combines into the operation. I'll start by getting each one of our John Deere S780 combines fired up and sent out onto their courseplay courses. Since all 5 combines are running the new pickup headers, this will actually be the first real test of our swathing system on a field of this size, and I'm really interested to see how everything performs once we start harvesting. For now, the combines will focus on clearing off the headlands. Not only will this start bringing in some wheat, but it's also going to create a lot more room for the rest of our harvest fleet to maneuver around the field. Right now, we got combines, auger wagons, semi-trucks, and swathers all trying to work in the same area. So opening up those headlands is going to be a big step toward getting this operation running smoothly. The biggest objective for today isn't necessarily harvesting a huge number of acres. More than anything, I want to get this entire harvest system fully set up and running. We've introduced a lot of new equipment and a completely different harvesting method compared to what we've used in previous years, so there are quite a few moving parts that need to come together. As the combines begin working around the field, I'll start turning my attention toward the transportation side of the operation. Once we've got enough room on the headlands, I'll begin creating our new auto drive routes for the semi-trucks so they can enter the field, position themselves for loading, and then haul all of the wheat back to the silos at our second farmyard. After that, I'll begin working on the auger wagon side of things as well. I'll need to create a new set of routes that allows our fleet of Case Steiger and Quadtrac tractors to automatically unload the combines, haul grain away from the harvesters, and then transfer that grain into the semi-trucks once their wagons are full. I'm especially curious to see how these new Elmer's Home Master grain carts perform. They're substantially larger than the Demco wagons we've been running in previous seasons, and with over 100,000 liters of capacity in each cart, they should be able to keep up with the combines much more effectively. I also have a feeling this harvest is going to behave quite a bit differently than what we're used to. Normally, our combines are directly harvesting standing wheat using draper headers, but now we're asking them to follow behind the swathers and pick up windrows instead. That changes the timing of the entire operation and could create some new challenges that we haven't had to deal with before. Because of that, I'm expecting there will probably be a bit of trial and error throughout the harvest. I may need to make adjustments to courseplay, tweak some auto drive settings, and fine-tune a few routes as we go. That's pretty normal anytime we introduce a completely new harvesting system on this scale. The good news is that we've got plenty of wheat ahead of us to test everything on. Between this massive 800-acre field and the rest of the 1,400 acres of wheat still waiting to be harvested, we'll have lots of opportunities to refine the system and make it even more efficient. For now, though, let's get these combines moving, start bringing in some wheat, and see how our brand new swathing harvest operation performed for the very first time. Looking back at everything we accomplished today, I'd say we made some pretty significant upgrades to the farm. We started the day by purchasing 5 brand new MacDon M 1240 swathers, so we could begin swathing all 1,400 acres of wheat. On top of that, we upgraded all 5 of our combines with pickup headers and then made another massive investment by replacing our Demco grain carts with 5 brand new Elmer's Hallmaster 3000 auger wagons. By the time everything was purchased, configured, and moved out to the field, we ended up spending well over $2 million on harvesting equipment upgrades alone. That's definitely not a small investment, but considering the scale of operation we're running now and the amount of grain we're expecting to bring in this year, I think these upgrades are going to pay for themselves very quickly. The swathers in particular have me really excited. If everything works the way it's supposed to, we should be receiving a substantial yield increase from our wheat harvest this year. When you're farming 1,400 acres of wheat, even a small increase in yield can result in a massive amount of additional grain. So I'm very interested to see what our final production numbers look like once we get all of these wheat field harvested. As for the harvest itself, I think things got off to a pretty good start overall. The swathers did an excellent job laying down the wheat, and once we finally got the combines into the field, they had no problem picking up the windrows and bringing in grain. Of course, no harvest on the 15,000 acre challenge would be complete without running into a few problems along the way. As I expected, our auger wagons have already started getting themselves into a bit of trouble around some of these tree lines. This is something we've dealt with quite a few times over the years, and it usually becomes most noticeable when we're working around the headlands of a field. The tractors are constantly turning, crossing paths, and trying to navigate around obstacles, which tends to confuse the hired workers every now and then. Thankfully, that's not something I'm overly concerned about at the moment. Once we finish these headlands and move into the long up and down passes through the middle of the field, things usually smooth out quite a bit. The workers have longer runs, fewer turns, and generally have a much easier time staying on course. The issue that has me a little more interested right now is what I've been noticing with the combines. Because we've switched over to pickup headers, the combines don't seem to be sensing each other the same way they normally do with the draper headers attached. A few times I noticed one combine catch up to another combine that was either full or temporarily stopped, and instead of waiting behind it like they normally would, the hired worker simply continued harvesting right past it. That's obviously not ideal because it can create some pretty strange traffic patterns and eventually lead to combines getting out of position or interfering with one another. Over the next episode, I'm going to spend some time experimenting with different settings to see if I can find a solution. There may be something in courseplay that needs adjusting, or perhaps a setting related to combine spacing that I haven't accounted for yet. If I can't find a solution in the settings, I think my backup plan will simply be to manually increase the spacing between all 5 combines. By giving each machine a larger gap, we should reduce the chances of them catching up to one another and hopefully eliminate some of those issues altogether. Next episode, we'll pick up right where we left off today and continue harvesting this massive 800-acre wheat field. I'll spend some time testing different courseplay and auto drive settings to try and smooth out a few of the issues we encountered today and hopefully get all 5 combines, all 5 auger wagons, and our fleet of semi-trucks working together a little more efficiently. Once we get everything dialed in, I have a feeling we're going to start chewing through these acres very quickly and bringing in some huge amounts of wheat. As always, thank you all so much for watching and supporting the 15,000 acre challenge. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode as we continue harvesting our massive 800-acre wheat field here on Huron County. Welcome back to episode 63 of the 15,000 acre challenge on the massive Huron County 16 X map. In today's episode, we're continuing our year 3 harvest season as we work towards bringing in over 4,800 acres of crops here on our growing 16 X mega farm. Over the past few episodes, we've been hard at work preparing for one of our biggest harvest seasons yet. After selling off millions of liters of grain and bringing in over $11 million in revenue, we reinvested a large portion of that money back into the farm by purchasing another 400-plus acre field and expanding our operation even further. We then kicked off year 3 by harvesting over 400 acres of oats and managed to bring in more than 1.6 million liters of grain from that field alone. In the last episode, we officially began harvesting our wheat crop and made some major upgrades to our harvesting fleet. Rather than harvesting the wheat directly with our combines, I decided to switch things up and take advantage of swathing, which should increase our overall yield by roughly 25%. To make that possible, we purchased 5 brand new MacDon M1240 swathers and sent them over to our largest field on the entire farm, an 800-acre wheat field located next to our second farmyard. While the swathers got to work laying down windrows of wheat, we also upgraded our grain cart fleet by trading in our Demco 2200 auger wagons and replacing them with 5 massive Elmer's Home Master 3,000 bushel auger wagons. These new grain carts are capable of holding over 100,000 liters each and should significantly improve the efficiency of our harvest operation. Once all of the equipment arrived at the field, we got our 5 John Deere S780 combines fitted with pickup headers and began harvesting the swaths of wheat laid down by the swathers. We also spent a good portion of the episode creating new courseplay and auto drive routes for the combines, auger wagons, and semi-trucks, so everything could work together as efficiently as possible. By the end of the episode, we had successfully begun harvesting the 800-acre wheat field, but as expected, we ran into a few challenges. Our auger wagons struggled a bit around the headlands, and we also discovered that our combines weren't properly spacing themselves apart while harvesting the swaths. Fortunately, most of these issues seem to be related to working around the headlands, and I'm hoping things will smooth out once we move into the long up and down passes through the middle of the field. To kick things off today, we'll be jumping right back into our first wheat harvest of year 3 as we continue working through this massive 800-acre field with our new swathing operation. At the moment, I only have one of our 5 John Deere S780 combines up and running. He's currently out in the field picking up the wheat swaths that our 5 MacDon M1240 swathers have been laying down, and before we get the rest of the harvest fleet rolling, I want to spend a little time try to work through some of the issues we ran into at the end of the last episode. As many of you saw, things didn't exactly go according to plan once we started harvesting. Normally, when we're running our combines with draper headers, Courseplay does a great job of keeping all 5 combines properly spaced out thanks to the convoy distance settings. Unfortunately, it seems like these pickup headers behave a little differently. Instead of waiting for one another and maintaining their spacing, the combines are simply driving right past any machine that's stopped and unloading. Before long, they end up bunching together, which creates a chain reaction of problems for both the combines and the grain cart operators. I've spent some time looking through the settings since the last episode, and unfortunately, I haven't found a perfect solution yet. So for now, we're going to take a more hands-on approach. I'll start by getting this first combine unloaded and giving him a good head start on the field. Once he has a decent lead established, I'll begin bringing the other 4 combines online one at a time and manually space them out around the field. My hope is that if I can keep enough distance between them early on, they'll remain spread out long enough for us to get through the headlands and into the long straight passes across the middle of the field. I think the headlands are where most of our problems are coming from right now. With all of the turning, stopping, and maneuvering, it takes longer for our grain cart operators to reach the combines and keep them unloaded. Once we get into the main body of the field and the combines are simply running long up and down passes, I think the entire operation should become much more predictable and hopefully much easier to manage. The combines aren't the only challenge we've been dealing with either. I've also been running into a few headaches with our new Elmer's Home Master 3,000 auger wagons. Overall, these grain carts have been a fantastic upgrade. Having 5 auger wagons in the field that can each hold over 100,000 liters of grain has dramatically increased our hauling capacity and should make a huge difference throughout the rest of harvest. However, getting them to unload smoothly into our semi-trucks has proven to be a bit trickier than I expected. The issue comes down to the adjustable discharge spout on the auger wagons. By default, The spout points almost straight down toward the ground. I can manually adjust it to throw grain farther into the trailer, but every time a hired worker folds the auger in and back out again, the spout resets to its original position. That means the grain cart has to drive extremely close to the truck in order to unload. When that happens, the semi-trucks detect the auger wagon as an obstacle and often refuse to pull into position properly, which creates traffic jams and slows the entire harvest down. So throughout today's episode, I'll be experimenting with several different solutions to try and improve the flow of the operation. Some of them may work and some of them may not, but that's just part of introducing new equipment and new harvesting methods on a farm of this size. Whenever we make major changes like switching to swathing or upgrading an entire fleet of grain carts, there's always going to be a bit of a learning curve before everything starts working together efficiently. Thankfully, we have a lot of acres left to harvest in this field, which gives us plenty of time to test different settings, make adjustments, and hopefully fine-tune the entire operation before we move on to the rest of our wheat crop. Things may be a little rough around the edges right now, but I'm confident that by the end of today's episode, we'll have a much better understanding of how to run this new system and hopefully have all 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, and 4 semi-trucks working together smoothly. Let's get back out into the field and see if we can get this harvest operation dialed in. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. While I've spent quite a bit of time trying different auto drive and unloading route configurations, and unfortunately, I just can't seem to get everything working the way I'd like. The combines themselves are doing a great job harvesting the wheat, but the biggest bottleneck right now is still the process of getting grain from our auger wagons into the semi-trucks efficiently. No matter what settings I adjust, the trucks and grain carts just don't seem to cooperate consistently enough for an operation of this size. At this point, I think the best solution is going to be bringing back a piece of equipment that's worked extremely well for us over the past 2 harvest seasons, the mother bin. Up until now, I was hoping our new Elmer's Haul Master 3000 auger wagons would be large enough that we could eliminate the mother bin entirely. But after seeing how everything is functioning in the field, I think having that extra buffer between the auger wagons and the semi-trucks is going to make the entire operation much more efficient. So I'm going to hop back over to the mega farm and get the mother bin brought over here to our 800-acre wheat field. Once it arrives, I'll park it on the field edge in a central location where all 5 of our auger wagons can easily access it. This should immediately solve the unloading issues we've been dealing with, because the auger wagons will be able to drive right up beside the mother bin and unload without worrying about getting too close to a moving semi-truck. The biggest advantage is that the mother bin will remain completely stationary. Since it won't be moving around the field, I can position it exactly where I need it and leave it there for the rest of the harvest. That means our auger wagons can focus entirely on keeping the combines unloaded while the semi-trucks can focus on hauling grain back to the farm. Instead of trying to coordinate direct transfers between moving equipment, we'll essentially split the operation into 2 separate systems that should be much easier to manage. Once the mother bin is in place, I'll reconfigure our auto drive routes and have the semi-trucks unload directly from the mother bin, just like we've done in previous years here on the 16X Mega Farm. It may not have been part of the original plan for this harvest, but sometimes the best solution is going back to a setup that's already proven itself. If everything works the way I'm expecting, this should help smooth out a lot of the issues we've been dealing with and allow us to really start making some serious progress through this massive wheat field. I'm actually going to do something here that I normally try to avoid whenever possible. Rather than waiting another 15 or 20 minutes for the mother bin to make the trip all the way across the map, I'm going to go ahead and reset it directly over to this field. Normally, I like to keep things as realistic as possible and move all of our equipment around the map ourselves. But at this point, our unloading issues are really starting to slow down the entire harvest operation. The combines are doing a great job harvesting wheat, but if we can't keep the grain moving away from the field efficiently, then we're just going to keep running into bottlenecks. I'd much rather get the mother bin over here right away and spend the rest of the day harvesting than sit around waiting for equipment to arrive. Once the mother bin is teleported over here, I'll get one of our John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors attached to it, so we can move it into position. One advantage we have is that we've actually harvested this field before. Back during year 2, this field was still only around 400 acres, and we used a very similar harvesting setup. So I'll be able to pull up some of our old auto drive routes and use them as a starting point for today's operation. That should save us quite a bit of time compared to creating everything from scratch again. Before I can park the mother bin exactly where I want it though, I'll need to be a little patient. A few of our combines are currently working through the section of the field where I'd like to set up the unloading area, so I need to let them clear out first. While we wait for that to happen, I'll switch over to our semi-trucks and get one of them headed toward the new unloading location. Once the truck arrives and gets parked where it'll be loading wheat from the mother bin, it'll give me a much better reference point for positioning everything else. After the truck is in place and the combines have harvested their way past the area, I'll move the mother bin into position and get it parked. From there, we'll start testing the new setup by hopping into one of our Case IH tractors and configuring it to follow a new auto drive route that unloads directly into the mother bin. If everything works the way I'm hoping, the auger wagon should be able to pull up, unload its grain, and head right back into the field without any issues. Once we're confident the system is working properly, I'll start moving through the rest of our grain cart fleet and switch all of the tractors over to the new unloading route as well. With any luck, this should finally eliminate the biggest bottleneck we've been dealing with today and allow our combines, auger wagons, and semi-trucks to start working together much more efficiently. If this setup performs the way it has in previous years, we should be able to make some serious progress through this massive 800-acre wheat field. Well, now that most of our tractors have been switched over to the new auto drive routes, I'm hoping we're finally starting to move in the right direction. The mother bin seems to be helping quite a bit already, and if everything continues working the way it has over the last few minutes, we should see a much smoother flow of grain moving from the combines all the way back to the farm. The unloading side of the operation was definitely our biggest bottleneck earlier today, so hopefully we've got that issue mostly under control now. However, while I've been watching everything run, another problem has started to become pretty obvious. I don't necessarily think the issue is with the auto drive routes anymore. I think the problem might actually be the tractors themselves. These new Elmer's Haulmaster 3000 auger wagons are absolutely enormous. Each wagon can hold well over 100,000 liters of wheat, and when they're loaded close to capacity, they're carrying a tremendous amount of weight. I've been noticing that several of our Case, Steiger, and Quadtrac tractors are having a difficult time slowing down when approaching the combines. Quite a few times now, I've watched a tractor line itself up perfectly for an unload, only for the auger wagon behind it to continue pushing the tractor forward once it starts braking. With that much grain sitting in the wagon, there's simply a lot of momentum working against the tractor. Instead of stopping where it should, the whole setup keeps rolling forward and occasionally ends up bumping into a combine or another nearby tractor. Normally, this wouldn't be a major issue, but when you've got 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, and multiple semi-trucks all operating in the same field at the same time, even small mistakes can create a chain reaction that slows everything down. The last thing I want is combine stopping because an auger wagon got itself stuck or crashed into another machine. Thankfully, I think we may have a solution sitting just down the road. Over at our satellite farm, we currently have a fleet of John Deere 9RX 830 tractors that aren't doing much at the moment. These tractors are significantly heavier than our Case Steigers, and they also produce considerably more horsepower. More importantly, the extra weight should help them stay in control when they're hauling these massive grain carts around the field. So rather than continuing to fight with the current setup, I'm going to start bringing some of those 9RX tractors over here, and we'll begin swapping them onto the auger wagons. Once they're hooked up, we'll send them back out into the field and see how they perform compared to the Case tractors. My hope is that the additional weight and power will give them much better control over the grain carts, especially when they're fully loaded and try to slow down near the combines. We've already spent a lot of time today fine-tuning this harvest operation and making adjustments, but that's really just part of managing a farm of this size. Every time we introduce new equipment, there's a bit of a learning curve before we find the perfect combination. If these 9RX tractors can handle the auger wagons the way I think they can, this might end up being another major improvement that helps us keep all 5 combines harvesting efficiently for the rest of this massive wheat harvest. I'd say we've made some really good progress today, even if a lot of our time was spent troubleshooting and fine-tuning our new harvesting setup. Whenever we introduce major changes to an operation this size, there's always going to be a bit of a learning curve, and I'd say that's exactly what today was all about. We spent a lot of time testing different auto drive routes, adjusting unloading locations, and trying to figure out the best way to keep all of our equipment working together efficiently. In the end, I think we finally found a setup that's going to work much better moving forward. Bringing the mother bin back into the operation was definitely the right decision. Try to unload directly from the auger wagons into the semi-trucks sounded like a good idea on paper, but in reality, it was creating too many traffic issues and slowing everything down. Now that the auger wagons are unloading into the mother bin and the semi-trucks are loading from a stationary location, the entire grain handling side of the operation seems to be running much smoother. We also made another major change today by swapping out all of our Case Steiger 580 tractors for the John Deere 9 RX 830s. Almost immediately I noticed a difference. The additional weight and horsepower of the 9RX tractors seems to be handling these massive Elmer's Hallmaster 3000 auger wagons much better. We're seeing fewer collisions, fewer missed unloads, and overall the entire harvest operation feels much more controlled than it did at the start of the episode. Because of how well the 9RX tractors performed, I actually decided to go ahead and sell off the Case Steiger 580s. Those tractors have been a huge part of this farm for quite a while, and they've served us incredibly well over the years. But as our operation continues to grow, we're starting to outgrow some of our equipment. The jobs we're asking our tractors to perform today are much bigger than they were when we first purchased those Steigers, and I think moving forward the John Deere 9 RX 830s are going to become our primary heavy-duty tractors for jobs like grain cart work, tillage, and other high-horsepower applications around the farm. Even with all of the progress we've made, we're still less than halfway through this massive 800-acre wheat field. The good news is that now that the operation is finally starting to run smoothly, we should be able to make much faster progress moving forward. Instead of constantly stopping to fix problems, we'll hopefully be able to spend most of our time simply harvesting wheat and keeping grain moving back to the farm. Next episode, we'll pick up right where we left off and continue working our way through this field. My goal is to really put these new systems to the test and see just how much wheat we can harvest in a single day now that everything seems to be working together properly. With 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, and 4 semi-trucks all running, I think we're finally in a position to start making some serious progress. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let me know down in the comments what you think about the changes we made to the harvest operation today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Welcome back to episode 64 of the 15,000 acre challenge on the massive Huron County, Michigan 16X map. In today's episode, we're heading right back out into one of the biggest wheat harvests we've ever attempted here on the farm as we continue working through our massive 800-acre wheat field. If you caught the last episode, then you may remember that while we made some great progress on the harvest, we also spent a lot of time troubleshooting and fine-tuning our brand new harvesting setup. Over the past few episodes, we've invested millions of dollars into upgrading our harvest fleet. We brought in 5 new MacDon M1240 swathers, 5 MacDon swath pickup headers for our combines, and 5 massive Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons. These upgrades have dramatically increased the scale of our operation, but getting everything working together smoothly proved to be a bit of a challenge. One of the biggest issues we ran into involved our auger wagon system. Originally, I had our auto drive workers unloading directly from the auger wagons into the semi-trucks. But with equipment this large, we started running into collision issues and traffic jams. To solve the problem, I brought back in our massive walkabout mother bin, which now acts as a buffer between the auger wagons and trucks. After testing it throughout the last episode, it seems to have completely solved the unloading issues and has made grain handling much more efficient. The second challenge involved the tractors pulling the auger wagons. Our fleet of Case IH tractors has served us well since the beginning of this challenge, but these new 3,000 bushel carts were simply too much for them to handle. When fully loaded, the wagons were actually pushing the tractors through intersections and causing some pretty spectacular crashes around the field. Since then, I've sold off those tractors and replaced them with a fleet of John Deere 9 RX 830s. These tractors have significantly more power and weight, and so far they seem to be handling the giant auger wagons much better. Even with all of those setbacks, we still managed to harvest around 1.6 million liters of wheat in the last episode alone. Now that most of the major issues have been worked out, it's time to see what this operation can really do. To kick things off today, I'll be hopping right back into the John Deere 9 RX 830 sitting behind me, which has just finished unloading another full load of wheat into the walkabout mother bin. Our entire harvesting fleet is already hard at work across this massive 800-acre field, and today my goal is simple. Keep everything moving and harvest as much wheat as possible. All 5 of our John Deere S780 combines are back out in the field running their new MacDon swath pickup headers as they work through the thousands of feet of windrows left behind by our swathers. The combines have been performing extremely well since we switched over to swathing, and the 25% yield bonus we're receiving from harvesting windrows is already proving to be well worth the extra effort. Every pass these combines make is bringing in huge amounts of grain, and our wheat stockpile is growing rapidly. Meanwhile, the 5 John Deere 9 RX 830s are continuing to haul our massive Elmer's Haulmaster 3,000 bushel carts around the field. Last episode, these tractors were one of the biggest upgrades we made, and already they're proving their worth. The extra power and weight have made a huge difference when moving these giant carts around the field, and it seems like we're spending far less time dealing with accidents and traffic issues. There are still the occasional hiccups here and there, but when you're running 5 combines, 5 auger wagons, 5 swathers, multiple trucks, and dozens of auto drive routes all inside one field, a few minor issues are almost impossible to avoid. Over on the north side of the field, our fleet of 5 MacDon M 1240 swathers is finally approaching the end of their work here. They're currently making the final passes on the remaining standing wheat, and before long this entire 800-acre field will be completely swathed. Once the swathers begin finishing up, I'll start moving them off the field one by one and sending them across the map using auto drive. Their next destination is the final wheat field of the year. While it's smaller than the field we're currently in, it's still an absolutely massive field in its own right, coming in at over 600 acres. I don't plan on actually starting the swathing operation there today, because I want to keep my focus on harvesting this 800-acre field, but I would like to get all 5 swathers relocated and staged on that next field. That way, when we start the next episode, we can immediately fire all 5 swathers back up and begin laying down windrows while our combines continue wrapping up the remaining acres here. My biggest priority today is making up for some of the lost harvesting time from the previous episode. We spent so much time troubleshooting equipment and making adjustments that our combines weren't able to cover nearly as many acres as I would have liked. Now that we've got the mother bin integrated into the operation and the new 9RX tractors pulling the auger wagons, everything seems to be running smoother than ever, and I'm excited to see just how much wheat we can bring in over the course of today's episode. The grain handling side of the operation should also be running much more efficiently now. The auger wagons can unload directly into the mother bin without slowing down, and I've got 4 semi-trucks continuously cycling between the field and our second farmyard. Their job is to keep the mother bin emptied out and haul all of that wheat back to our massive silo complex. The drive isn't very far, which means we should be able to move grain off the field quickly and keep the combines running without interruption. At this point, we've already harvested more than 1.6 million liters of wheat from this field, and we're still nowhere near finished. In fact, we're still well under halfway done harvesting the entire 800 acres. The more I think about it, the more curious I'm becoming about whether our current storage setup is actually going to be large enough. The silo complex, our second farm, can hold 6 million liters of grain, and with the yields we're seeing so far, I honestly think we're going to be cutting it very close by the time this harvest is finished. If the yields continue the way they have been, we may end up filling a massive portion of that entire silo complex with wheat alone. We've got a huge day ahead of us, a massive amount of wheat still standing in the field, and what could end up being one of the biggest grain harvests we've ever completed here on the 15,000 acre challenge. Let's fire up the equipment, get the combines rolling, and see just how much wheat we can harvest from this incredible 800 acre field today. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Well, everything already seems to be running so much smoother than it was in the previous episode. Bringing in a fleet of John Deere 9 RX 830s has been a massive improvement for this operation, and it's becoming pretty clear that these tractors are much better suited for the job of handling our massive Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons. The extra weight and horsepower these tractors have compared to the old Case Steigers has made a huge difference, and we're seeing far fewer accidents and traffic issues around the field because of it. At this point, the grain handling side of the operation is running about as well as I could have hoped for. The walkabout mother bin is working perfectly. Our semi-trucks are keeping up with hauling grain back to the farm, and the 9RX tractors are handling the auger wagons without any trouble. The one thing I still haven't been able to find a perfect solution for, though, is the combines themselves. The combines are all harvesting extremely well, and mechanically everything is working exactly as it should, but for whatever reason Courseplay doesn't seem to handle these swath pickup headers the same way it handles our normal draper headers. Normally, when we're harvesting with draper headers, the convoy distance settings work perfectly. I can tell the combines exactly how much space to leave between each other, and they'll maintain that spacing throughout the entire field. With these pickup headers, however, it seems like the combines don't properly recognize the machine in front of them. What ends up happening is that when the lead combine fills up and stops to be unloaded, the combine behind it simply keeps driving right past instead of slowing down and maintaining its spacing. Before long, I end up with multiple combines bunched together and several grain tanks filling up at the same time. It's not necessarily hurting our harvesting efficiency because the combines are still continuously harvesting wheat, but it does create a few challenges for the unloading operation. When several combines need to be unloaded at once, the auger wagons often have to cross over the windrows to reach them, and ideally, I'd like to avoid driving over any of these wheat swaths if possible. In a perfect world, the combines would stay evenly spaced throughout the entire field, and the auger wagons will be able to unload them one at a time as they fill up. I've spent quite a bit of time testing different settings and trying a few different approaches, but so far I haven't found a perfect solution. For now, I'm just going to continue managing the spacing as best I can, keep an eye on the combines, and make sure the auger wagons are staying ahead of the grain tanks. As long as the combines keep harvesting, the auger wagons keep unloading, and the wheat keeps making its way back to the farm, I'll be pretty happy with that. Sometimes on an operation this large, getting everything to work perfectly just isn't realistic, and as long as we can keep all 5 combines moving, we're still making excellent progress through this massive 800-acre wheat field. Well, it looks like our fleet of 5 MacDon M 1240 swathers have officially finished their work in this massive 800-acre wheat field. That's a huge milestone for this harvest because it means every single acre of wheat in this field has now been cut and laid into windrows. At this point, the only thing left to do here is get all of those swaths picked up and hauled back to the farm. I'm going to take a quick break from running the auger wagon and shift my attention over to the swathers. One by one, I'll begin setting each machine up on auto drive and sending them across the map to their next assignment. Their destination will be field 146, which just so happens to be the final wheat field we'll be harvesting this year. While it's smaller than the field we're currently working in, it's still an absolutely massive field in its own right, coming in at just over 600 acres. Each swather is going to have quite the journey ahead of it. With the size of this 16x map, it'll take roughly 16 minutes for each machine to make the drive from here over to field 146. I'll be keeping a close eye on them throughout the day to make sure they arrive safely, but once they get there, they'll be parked up and shut down until the next episode. I don't want to start cutting that field just yet, because I like to keep the focus on finishing as much of this 800-acre harvest as possible before we move the rest of the fleet. Honestly, it's going to be nice getting a few machines off this field for a while. We've had an incredible amount of equipment running out here over the past couple episodes. Between the 5 swathers, 5 combines, 5 auger wagons for semi-trucks, and all of the supporting equipment, we've had close to 20 machines working together in a single field. That's made for an impressive operation, but it's definitely been putting my computer to work as well. The FPS has been taking a bit of a hit with everything running at once, so moving the swathers out of here should help things run a little smoother. It also makes sense from an operational standpoint. With the swathers gone, our combines will have a much easier time working through the remaining windrows without having to navigate around parked equipment or active swathers. From this point forward, the entire focus of this field can shift toward harvesting and grain movement. Looking ahead to the next episode, the plan is to get those 5 swathers fired back up and begin cutting the final 600-acre wheat field, while our combines continue picking up the last remaining swaths here in the 800-acre field. Once the combines finally finish this field, we'll move the entire harvest fleet over to field 146. By that point, the swathers should already have a significant head start, and there should be hundreds of acres worth of windrows waiting for us. Hopefully that will allow us to transition smoothly from one massive wheat harvest to the next, and keep these combines running non-stop as we continue bringing in millions of liters of wheat here on the 15,000-acre challenge. Well, I'd have to say I'm extremely happy with how smoothly everything seems to be running today. After all of the troubleshooting, equipment changes, and route adjustments we had to make in the last episode, it's really satisfying to finally see this entire operation working the way it was intended to. The combines are harvesting, the auger wagons are keeping up, the mother bin is doing its job perfectly, and the semi-trucks are continuously hauling grain back to the farm. This is exactly what I envisioned when we started putting this harvest fleet together. At this point, we now have over 2.8 million liters of wheat stored inside the massive silo complex at our second farmyard. That's a pretty incredible number considering we started the day with around 1.6 million liters already in storage. That means we've hauled back well over 1.2 million liters of wheat during today's episode alone. And that's not even counting all of the grain that's currently sitting inside our auger wagons, combines, and the walkabout mother bin. When you factor all of that in, I'd say we've probably harvested just about as much wheat today as we did during the entire previous episode. What's really starting to amaze me is just how productive this field has been. We're only sitting at around the halfway point of harvesting this massive 800-acre field, and we've already accumulated nearly 3 million liters of wheat. Earlier in the episode, one mentioned that I was curious whether we'd be able to fit all of the grain from this field into a single silo complex, and the more we harvest, the more I'm convinced it's going to be extremely close. The silo complex over at our second farmyard can hold 6 million liters of grain, and at the rate we're going, there's a very real chance we could come close to filling a huge portion of that capacity from this one field alone. Thankfully, we still have another 6 million liters of storage available back at our main farmyard, so we're not in any danger of running out of space. But it's still pretty crazy to think that a single 800-acre wheat field can produce this much grain. I think a lot of that really comes down to the swathing system. That 25% yield bonus has made a massive difference, and it's easy to see why so many real-world farmers choose to swath crops when conditions allow for it. The extra work of running 5 swathers ahead of the combines is definitely paying off as we're bringing in some absolutely incredible yields from this field. For now, though, we've still got hundreds of acres left to harvest and millions of liters of wheat still standing out here, waiting to be picked up. Let's get back to work. Keep these combines moving and see just how much more grain we can pull out of this massive 800-acre field before the day is over. I'd have to say this was a much more successful day than our last time out in this massive 800-acre wheat field. After spending so much time in the previous episode troubleshooting equipment and making adjustments to our harvest setup, it was really nice to see everything finally come together and run the way we had hoped. The combination of the John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors, the massive Elmer's Haulmaster auger wagons, the Walkabout mother bin, and our fleet of semi-trucks seems to be working extremely well together, and because of that we've been able to bring in a huge amount of wheat today. One of the biggest milestones from today's episode was getting all 5 of our MacDon M1240 swathers finished up in this field. Every acre of this 800-acre wheat field has now been swathed, and those machines have already made their way across the map and are waiting at our next wheat field. That means next episode, we'll be able to fire all 5 swathers right back up and begin cutting our final wheat field of the year, which comes in at just over 600 acres. As for this field, we've made some incredible progress. By the end of today's episode, we're now sitting just over halfway through harvesting this massive 800-acre field, and the yields continue to impress me more and more. We now have over 3.8 million liters of wheat stored inside our silo complex, and we're still nowhere near finished with this harvest. The 25% yield bonus from swathing has made a huge difference, and it's honestly pretty crazy to see just how much grain is coming off of a single field. Looking ahead to the next episode, the goal is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to push hard to try and finish harvesting the remainder of this 800-acre field, while also getting all 5 swathers started on that final 600-acre wheat field. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to keep our harvesting fleet moving continuously and transition straight from one massive wheat harvest into another. And once all of the wheat is finally harvested and hauled back to the farm, it'll be time to start turning our attention toward the next major challenge of year 2. Sitting out in the fields waiting for us are roughly 3,000 acres of corn, and before long we'll be firing up the combines once again and getting ready for what could end up being one of the biggest corn harvests we've ever tackled here on the 15,000-acre challenge. But that's going to do it for today. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let me know down in the comments. Do you think we'll be able to fit all of the wheat from this 800-acre field into our current silo complex? Or are we going to have to start using storage at the main farm as well? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Welcome back to episode 65 of the 15,000-acre challenge on the massive Huron County, Michigan 16X map. In today's episode, we continue working away on our massive 800-acre wheat field as we push to harvest as much of this field as possible using our brand new harvesting fleet. Over the past few episodes, we've made some major upgrades to our operation, including 5 new MacDon M1240 swathers, 5 MacDon swath pickup headers for our John Deere S780 combines, and a fleet of massive Elmer's Haulmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons. After working through a few issues getting all of our new equipment running together, everything finally started operating exactly how I had hoped. One of the biggest improvements came from replacing our old fleet of Case IH tractors with 5 brand new John Deere 9 RX 830s. The extra power and weight from these tractors has made a huge difference when pulling our fully loaded auger wagons, and we've had far fewer accidents throughout the harvest because of it. We also brought our Walkabout mother bin back into the operation, which has completely eliminated the traffic issues we were having unloading directly into our semi-trucks. By the end of the last episode, our 5 MacDon swathers had officially finished swathing the entire 800-acre wheat field, and I moved all 5 machines across the map to our final wheat field of the season, which comes in at just over 600 acres. They'll be waiting there ready to begin swathing as soon as we arrive in today's episode. We also made some incredible progress on the harvest itself. By the end of the day, we had already hauled more than 3.8 million liters of wheat back to our massive farm silo complex, and we're now just over halfway finished harvesting this enormous 800-acre field. If everything continues running smoothly, we should be able to make some serious progress today as we continue building our massive wheat stockpile before turning our attention to the final wheat field of the season. To kick things off today, we're already back behind the wheel of one of our massive John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors as we continue hauling enormous amounts of wheat out of this 800-acre wheat field. Over the past few episodes, we've been hard at work swathing and harvesting this field, while also trying to get all of our brand new equipment working together as efficiently as possible. We had a few growing pains early on, but after making several changes to the operation, I'd say we're finally starting to see all of that hard work pay off. We've now harvested just over half of this massive field, but there's still hundreds of acres of wheat standing in front of us, and my goal for today is to make a serious dent in what's left. If everything keeps running as smoothly as it has been, there's a good chance we'll have a majority of this 800-acre field harvested before today's episode comes to an end. Every piece of equipment is back out in the field and ready for another long day of harvesting. Our fleet of 5 John Deere S780 combines are all fired up and running their brand new MacDon swath pickup headers as they continue picking up the wheat swaths that our MacDon M1240 swathers left behind over the past few episodes. Following close behind those combines is our fleet of 5 John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors, each one pulling one of our massive Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons. 4 of those tractors are currently being controlled by auto drive, while I'll be running the 5th one myself. Together we'll be doing everything we can to keep all 5 combines unloaded so they never have to stop harvesting. As the combines begin filling their grain tanks, our auto drive workers will make their way alongside each combine and unload the wheat into the auger wagons. Once an auger wagon is full, it'll automatically head across this massive field to our unloading area where our walkabout mother bin is waiting on the field edge. The mother bin has become one of the biggest improvements we've made to this harvest. Instead of trying to unload directly into the semi-trucks, which caused all kinds of traffic and collision issues earlier in the harvest, the auger wagons can now simply pull alongside the mother bin, unload their wheat, and immediately head back into the field to keep the combines moving. While the auger wagons continue cycling back and forth between the combines and the mother bin, our fleet of semi-trucks takes over from there. As the mother bin fills with wheat, each truck pulls underneath the unloading auger, loads up a full Wilson grain trailer, and then heads across the map to our second farmyard where we've built our massive grain storage complex. Every truckload that arrives there continues growing our wheat stockpile, and with how incredible this field has been yielding, those trucks have been making non-stop trips all harvest long. At the beginning of this harvest, we ran into quite a few issues getting all of this new equipment working together. Between the larger auger wagons, the mother bin, the new tractors, and the swath pickup headers, there were plenty of adjustments that needed to be made. After several episodes of fine-tuning the operation, though, everything is finally starting to come together. We still run into the occasional collision or small hiccup, but considering we're operating well over 15 vehicles inside the same field all at once, I'd say the system is working incredibly well. At this point, we've now hauled back over 4 million liters of wheat to our silo complex at the second farmyard, and honestly, this field has exceeded every expectation I had. We spent a tremendous amount of time preparing this field throughout the spring by making sure every stage of field work was completed properly. But on top of that, we're also benefiting from the 25% yield bonus that comes from swathing the crop before harvesting it. That bonus is really starting to show now. And it's becoming more and more obvious that this one 800-acre field alone is probably going to produce more wheat than our entire second farm silo complex can hold. Thankfully, we still have another 6 million liters of storage capacity back at our original mega farm, so finding room for all of this wheat shouldn't be a problem. The crazy part is we're not even finished yet. We still have another 600-acre wheat field waiting for us once this harvest is complete. Speaking of that next field, we're actually going to try and get a head start on it before today's episode is over. Once I'm satisfied that everything here in the 800-acre field is running smoothly, I'll hand my John Deere 9 RX 830 over to another hired worker and make the trip across the map to where our fleet of 5 MacDon M1240 swathers has been waiting. Those swathers have been sitting patiently since the last episode, And today, we'll finally get them fired back up to begin laying down the first swaths in our final 600-acre wheat field of the season. That way, while our combines continue wrapping up the last of this 800-acre field, the next harvest will already be well underway. We've still got an enormous amount of wheat left to bring in, millions more liters to haul back to the farm, and another massive field waiting to be swayed. So let's fire up the engines, get the combines rolling, and see just how much progress we can make today on the 15,000-acre challenge. If you're looking forward to the 15,000-acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Well, we've now got all 5 of our MacDon M 1240 swathers fired back up and working away in our final 600-acre wheat field of the season. They should be able to get a tremendous head start over there while we continue wrapping up this massive 800-acre field. If everything goes according to plan, there's actually a good chance the swathers will have the entire 600-acre field laid down before our combines even arrive. That would be the ideal scenario, because as soon as we finish harvesting here, we'll be able to move our combine straight over to the next field and immediately begin picking up swaths without having to wait on the swathers. Now that the swathers are taken care of, I've made my way back over to the 800-acre field to rejoin the harvest. From this point forward, my main focus is simply keeping these 5 John Deere S780 combines harvesting as efficiently as possible. We've already come a long way today, and if everything continues running as smoothly as it has been, I think there's a real chance we can either finish this field completely or get extremely close before the end of today's episode. One thing that's really starting to stand out now is just how incredible this wheat crop has been yielding. At this point, we've already hauled more than 4.5 million liters of wheat back to the silo complex at our second farmyard. And every truckload that leaves this field keeps pushing that total even higher. It's honestly turning into one of the biggest grain harvests we've ever had in this series. And the combination of all the field preparation we completed earlier in the year along with the 25% swathing bonus has really paid off. As impressive as these yields are though, they're also creating a brand new challenge. We're getting closer and closer to filling the entire 6 million liter capacity of the silo complex at our second farmyard. Once that happens, I'll have to completely change how our grain hauling operation works. Instead of making a short trip to the second farm, our semi-trucks will need to start hauling wheat all the way back to the original mega farm. That's going to be a huge increase in travel time. Right now, our trucks only have about a 2-minute round trip between the mother bin and the second farmyard, which allows them to cycle back and forth very quickly. Once we switch over to hauling grain to the mega farm, each trip across the map takes roughly 14 minutes one way. That means every truck will be tied up for nearly half an hour before it returns to the field for another load. Fortunately, I do have several more semi-trucks parked back at the mega farm, so if we begin falling behind on hauling grain away from the field, I can always expand the fleet and put even more trucks on the road. Hopefully we won't need them, but with the amount of wheat this field is producing, it's definitely nice to have that option available. For now though, everything is still running beautifully. The combines are harvesting non-stop, the auger wagons are keeping them unloaded, the mother bin is acting as the perfect buffer between the field and the trucks, and our wheat stockpile just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Let's get back to work and see just how much more grain we can pull off this incredible 800-acre field today. Well, I'd have to say everything is running just about as smoothly as I could have hoped for today. After spending the last few episodes fine-tuning this entire harvesting operation, it's really satisfying to finally sit back and watch all of the equipment working together the way it was intended. Our 5 John Deere S780 combines are harvesting non-stop. The John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors are doing a fantastic job keeping them unloaded, and our fleet of semi-trucks has been constantly hauling wheat away from the field. Because of that, we've managed to make some incredible progress on this massive 800-acre harvest. At this point, we've now hauled over 5.1 million liters of wheat back to the silo complex at our second farmyard. That means we've harvested and transported well over another million liters of wheat just during today's episode alone, which really shows how productive this new harvesting system has become. The combination of the swath pickup headers, the walkabout mother bin, and our upgraded auger wagons has made a huge difference, and we're moving grain off this field faster than ever before. As exciting as these yields are, they're also creating a brand new challenge for us. The silo complex at our second farm can only hold 6 million liters, and we're getting dangerously close to reaching that limit. At the rate these combines are harvesting, it won't be long before those silos are completely full, which means it's time to start preparing for the next stage of our grain hauling operation. Rather than waiting until the silos are completely maxed out, I'm going to start transitioning our truck fleet now. At the moment, we have 4 semi-trucks hauling wheat from the walkabout mother bin over to the second farmyard. My plan is to reconfigure 2 of those trucks so they begin making the much longer trip back to the original mega farm, where we have another 6 million liters of storage waiting for us. While those trucks are being switched over, I'll also head back to the mega farm myself and fire up another semi-truck that's been sitting in the yard. Once it's hooked up and configured with auto drive, it'll join the operation as well, giving us 3 trucks hauling grain back to the mega farm, while 2 trucks continue servicing the second farm. I'd have to say this has been another incredibly productive day here on the 15,000 Acre Challenge. After spending the last few episodes getting all of our new harvesting equipment dialed in, everything finally seems to be running exactly the way I had envisioned. Our 5 John Deere S780 combines, 5 John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors, the Elmer's Haulmaster auger wagons, the Walkabout mother bin, and our fleet of semi-trucks have all been working together almost flawlessly, allowing us to harvest and haul an unbelievable amount of wheat today. One of the biggest accomplishments from today's episode was getting all 5 of our MacDon M1240 swathers started on the final 600-acre wheat field of the season. While our combines continued working away here in the 800-acre field, the swathers have been making excellent progress across the map and should have a huge head start waiting for us when it's finally time to move the harvesting fleet over there. We've also reached another incredible milestone with our wheat harvest. Between the grain we've hauled back to our second farmyard and the trucks now delivering wheat to the original mega farm, we've officially stored well over 6 million liters of wheat. Honestly, I never expected this one field to produce this much grain, but between all of the work we put into preparing the field earlier this year and the 25% yield bonus from swathing, this harvest has completely exceeded my expectations. Looking at how much wheat is still sitting in the combines, auger wagons, and the final few passes that remain standing, I think there's a very good chance we'll surpass 7 million liters of wheat by the time this 800-acre field is completely harvested and every last load has been hauled back to the farm. As this episode comes to an end, we've only got a handful of passes remaining before this massive 800-acre field is finally finished. It's pretty amazing to think that after everything we've put into this harvest over the past several episodes, we're finally within sight of the finish line. Looking ahead to the next episode, our first priority will be wrapping up these final passes and getting every last liter of wheat hauled off the field. Once that's complete, we'll begin one of the biggest equipment moves we've ever made in this series as our entire harvesting fleet makes the trip across the map to our final 600-acre wheat field of year 3. Thankfully, our MacDon swathers have already been hard at work laying down swaths. So when the combines arrive, they should be able to jump straight into harvesting without missing a beat. But that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let me know down in the comments. How much wheat do you think we'll end up harvesting from this incredible 800-acre field? Do you think we'll break the 7 million liter mark before it's all said and done? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Welcome back to episode 66 of our 15,000 Acre Challenge here on the Huron County, Michigan 16X map. If you caught the last episode, then you may remember we continued pushing through our biggest wheat harvest. Yet, as our fleet of 5 John Deere S780 combines work side by side harvesting our massive 800-acre wheat field. While the combines continued picking up the swaths left behind by our MacDon swathers, we also got a head start on our next harvest by sending all 5 MacDon M1240 swathers over to our 600-acre wheat field, where they began laying down swaths for the next stage of the harvest. As the day went on, we continued hauling millions of liters of wheat back to our grain storage facilities. We completely filled the 6 million liter silo complex at our second farmyard before reconfiguring our trucking fleet and beginning the much longer haul back to the main mega farm. By the end of the episode, we'd already hauled well over 6 million liters of wheat into storage, and it was becoming clear this 800-acre field was going to produce far more grain than we originally expected. We wrapped up the episode with only a handful of passes remaining on the 800-acre field, meaning today we'll finally finish harvesting the biggest wheat field we've ever taken on in this series. Once the last of the wheat is safely in the bins, we'll move our entire harvesting fleet across the map to the 600-acre wheat field and continue one of the biggest harvest seasons we've ever had here on the 15,000 Acre Challenge. To kick things off today, we're right back out in the middle of our absolutely massive 800-acre wheat field as we prepare to harvest the final few passes and officially wrap up the biggest field we've ever harvested here on the 15,000 Acre Challenge. This field has been one of the largest projects we've ever taken on in the series, and over the past several episodes we've been working around the clock to bring in what has turned out to be an incredible wheat crop. We've already hauled, well, over 6 million liters of wheat back to our grain storage facilities, and with these final few passes still standing out in front of us, we're on track to push that total to somewhere around 7 million liters by the time every last kernel of wheat has been harvested and hauled back to the farm. We're picking things up exactly where we left off in the last episode. All 5 John Deere S780 combines, equipped with their brand new MacDon swath pickup headers, are already fired up and waiting to continue harvesting the final swaths that remain in this enormous field. Supporting them once again is our fleet of 5 John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors, each pulling one of our new Elmer's Haulmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons. 4 of those tractors are currently being controlled by auto drive, while I'll once again be taking over the 5th tractor myself, making sure our combines stay unloaded so that they can keep harvesting without interruption. Over on the south side of the field, our unloading operation is already up and running as well. Our Case IH 645 is parked beside the field with a massive walkabout mother bin, while our fleet of 5 semi-trucks continues making the long haul across this enormous 16X map. As the auger wagons unload into the mother bin, the trucks immediately take over, loading up massive quantities of wheat before hauling it all the way back to our mega farm, where it's being stored inside our growing grain complex. This harvest has produced far more wheat than I ever expected, and watching millions upon millions of liters continue flowing back to the farm has been pretty incredible. Now, although we're only minutes away from finishing this field, today's work is really just beginning. The moment these last passes are harvested, we'll waste absolutely no time packing everything up and moving our entire harvesting fleet across the map to our final 600-acre wheat field. Last episode, we sent all 5 MacDon M1240 swathers down to that field to get a head start while we concentrated on finishing this 800-acre field, and they've been making fantastic progress ever since. By the time our combines arrive, there should already be hundreds of acres of perfectly laid wheat swaths waiting for us, allowing the harvesting operation to continue almost immediately without losing any valuable time. As each combine finishes its final pass here today, I'll stop it, completely unload the grain tanks, and then fold everything up before sending each combine onto auto drive for the long trip across the map. Once the combines are on the road, I'll gather all 5 of our 9 RX tractors around the walkabout mother bin so we can unload every last bushel of wheat sitting inside the auger wagons. After that, each tractor will also be sent on its way to the next field. The only piece of equipment that may have to stay behind for a little while longer is the walkabout mother bin itself. Our semi-trucks will need a bit more time to make another round trip, so they can completely empty the mother bin before we finally fold it up and move it over as well. While all of that equipment is making its way across the map, I'll jump into the Chevy Silverado and head over to the 600-acre field myself. Once I arrive, we'll check in on the swathers to see just how much of the field they've already completed before we begin setting up our combines. I'll copy the same courseplay routes the swathers have been using so each combine follows the exact same path and picks up every swath they've laid down. Since we harvested this field during year 2, we should also be able to reuse most of our auto drive network from last season, which should make getting this entire harvesting operation back up and running much quicker than last time. We've got a huge day ahead of us as we finally finish harvesting the biggest wheat field we've ever tackled, hauling what should be around 7 million liters of wheat, and then move our entire harvesting fleet across this massive 16X map to begin the final 600-acre wheat harvest of year 3. So let's fire up the engines and get to work. If you're looking forward to the 15,000-acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Our massive 800-acre wheat field is now officially completely harvested. After several episodes of harvesting around the clock, we've finally brought in every last acre of wheat from what has easily been the biggest field we've ever harvested here on the 15,000-acre challenge. I'd have to say this field has exceeded every expectation I had. We've hauled back millions upon millions of liters of wheat, completely filled one of our grain complexes, and even had to start storing wheat back at our original mega farm because the yields were simply too good to fit everything into one location. I've now got all 5 of our John Deere S780 combines completely unloaded, folded up, and back out onto the road where they're beginning the long drive across this massive 16x map over to our final 600-acre wheat field. While the combines are making their way over there, I'll head over to our walkabout mother bin with my auger wagon because I have a feeling we've still got a few of our 9RX tractors sitting there waiting to unload their final loads of wheat from this field. Once I arrive, I'll make sure our fleet of 5 semi-trucks is still running smoothly and hauling every last bushel of wheat back to the grain silos at our mega farm before I begin emptying all 5 of our John Deere 9RX 830 tractors. Once every auger wagon is completely empty, I'll also get each tractor folded up and sent across the map on auto drive so they can join the combines at the next field. The only piece of equipment that may be staying behind for a little while longer is the walkabout mother bin itself. Our semi-trucks will probably need one more full cycle to completely empty it before we can move it, but that's perfectly fine because it gives us some time to start getting the next harvest prepared. While our trucking fleet finishes hauling the remaining wheat, I'll jump into the Chevy Silverado and make my way over to the 600-acre field. Once I arrive, I like to check in on our fleet of 5 MacDon M 1240 swathers and see just how much progress they've made while we've been finishing up the 800-acre field. They should have left us with hundreds of acres of perfectly laid wheat swaths waiting to be picked up, which means our combines should be able to get right back to harvesting almost immediately once they arrive. As the combines begin pulling into the field, I'll start getting each one reconfigured with the new courseplay courses that the swathers have been using. That way every combine will follow the exact same paths the swathers took and won't miss a single swath of wheat. Before we kick the harvest back off though, I want to take a couple minutes to give everything a quick wash. Attached to each one of our Elmer's Hallmaster 3,000 bushel auger wagons is a water tank that doubles as a fire suppression system and a portable wash station. After spending several days harvesting an 800-acre field, our combines, tractors, and auger wagons have definitely earned a quick rinse before heading into the final harvest of the season. Once everything is cleaned up, I'll begin firing up each combine one by one and sending them out into the field while I get all 5 of our John Deere 9RX 830 tractors back on auto drive so they can once again keep the combines unloaded. By the time our harvesting fleet is fully operational again, our semi-trucks should have finished emptying the walkabout mother bin back at the previous field. At that point, I'll quickly fold it up, send it over here as well, and then reconfigure all 5 semi-trucks so that once they finish hauling the last loads of wheat from the 800-acre field, they'll immediately begin servicing our brand new harvesting operation here on the final 600-acre wheat field as we officially kick off the last wheat harvest of year 3. All of our combines and John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors have now arrived at the field, and I'd have to say everything is coming together really nicely. I've got all 5 John Deere S780 combines staged out across the field edge, and before we kick off the final harvest of the season, I took a few minutes to give every combine, tractor, and auger wagon a quick wash. After spending the last several episodes working through that massive 800-acre field, they definitely earned it. And now our entire harvesting fleet is cleaned up and ready to tackle the final 600-acre wheat field of year 3. Now it's time to get this operation back up and running. Rather than firing up all 5 combines at once, I'm going to send them out into the field one at a time. My goal is to create a nice gap between each combine before the next one starts harvesting. Since we're running the MacDon swath pickup headers, courseplay doesn't always respect the convoy distance setting. So spacing the combines out manually should greatly reduce the chances of them catching each other or trying to drive past one another later in the harvest. I'll be taking the same approach with our fleet of John Deere 9 RX 830 tractors as well. Instead of turning all 5 tractors loose at the same time, I'll wait until each tractor locks onto the combine that just started harvesting before sending the next one into the field. That way, every auger wagon should pair up with a different combine right from the start, instead of having all 5 tractors chasing the same machine and creating complete chaos during those first few minutes of the harvest. Back over at the previous field, our walkabout mother bin should be just about empty by now. As soon as the last of the wheat is loaded into the semi-trucks, I'll jump over there, get everything folded up, and send it on a long drive over to this field as well. Ideally, I'd like to have the mother bin parked on the field edge and our fleet of 5 semi-trucks reconfigured and waiting before our first Elmer's Hall Master auger wagon fills up with wheat. If everything works out, we'll be able to transition from harvesting the 800-acre field straight into this 600-acre field without losing any time at all. We've already accomplished one huge milestone today by finishing the biggest wheat field we've ever harvested here on the 15,000-acre challenge. But we're not done yet. We still have 600 more acres standing in front of us. And once this field is complete, we'll officially have our entire 1,400-acre year 3 wheat harvest wrapped up. So let's get these combines moving, keep the auger wagons rolling, and see just how much wheat we can bring in before the day is over. Today was another huge milestone here on the 15,000 acre challenge. We officially finished harvesting our massive 800-acre wheat field, making it the biggest field we've ever harvested in this entire series. After several episodes of non-stop harvesting, our fleet of 5 John Deere S780 combines finally brought in the last of the wheat, and the final numbers were absolutely incredible. We ended up harvesting around 6.6 million liters of wheat from that one field alone, which is far more than I ever expected when we first started this harvest. Once that field was wrapped up, we wasted no time packing up our entire harvesting operation and making the long trip across this massive 16x map to our final 600-acre wheat field. Even though we spent a good portion of today's episode relocating equipment, getting new courseplay courses generated, and setting our auto-drive routes back up, we still managed to make some excellent progress. We've already harvested all of the headland passes and worked our way into the up and down passes, so the operation is now running smoothly once again, and we're well on our way to finishing the final wheat harvest of year 3. The yields continue to be absolutely unbelievable as well. By the end of today's episode, we've already increased our total wheat production to around 7.6 million liters, meaning we managed to harvest another 1 million liters of wheat from this 600-acre field despite all of the downtime we had moving our harvesting fleet across the map. I'd have to say I'm extremely happy with how this year's wheat harvest has turned out, and it's going to be really interesting to see just how much grain we end up with once these final 600 acres are completely finished. Back at the mega farm, everything is running exactly as planned too. We still had some propane left in the grain dryer, so every load of wheat arriving from the field is already being dried and moved into storage as soon as our semi-truck's unloaded. Once we finish harvesting this final field though, we'll need to shift our attention over to our secondary farm, where we currently have 6 million liters of wheat sitting in storage. We'll have to get another load of propane delivered over there, so we can fire up that grain dryer as well and begin drying all of that wheat before it's eventually sold. Looking ahead to the next episode, we'll continue pushing through this final 600-acre wheat field and hopefully wrap up our entire 1,400-acre year 3 wheat harvest. Once the last of the wheat is safely in the bins, it'll finally be time to start preparing for one of the biggest jobs we've ever taken on here at the mega farm, our massive 3,000-acre corn harvest. That's going to require every combine, every auger wagon, and every semi-truck we own, and I honestly can't wait to get started. But that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let me know down in the comments. How many liters of wheat do you think we'll end up harvesting once this entire 1,400-acre wheat harvest is finally complete? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.